I think we get more animal lawyers and more high quality animal lawyers through a number of mechanisms. I think the fellowships that the Brooks Institute is doing for LLM students are a really, really good tool, and that's going to help in that direction. I also think student loan forgiveness is a big piece of the puzzle. I know I chose the law school that I went to because it had a student loan forgiveness program. I've been able to do the work that I've done because of that. And I think particularly given the uncertainty of the federal government loan forgiveness and just the inherently lower pay of doing this work, if that can be made available, that will enable more people to break into this field. But I do think training, not just for JD students, but for practicing lawyers who maybe want to change their area of practice or just get more refined in their skills is really important. And I think that can be done a number of ways. So the LLM programs are a great way, and folks can work in clinics to get hands-on experience, but there are also other ways we can offer trainings.
I think it's imperative that we're getting law school students into the work as soon as possible. When it comes to specifically animal law, I think we also need to be exposing students to legislation, policy making, lobbying, and just more general advocacy skills, because many of the roles are in those tents, and we're not really exposing students to that. So I think it really behooves nonprofits in particular and government institutions to make those opportunities available. Share some funding with these law schools, make it available to students to experience this so that they're drawn to us, and we can create pathways to not only have more animal lawyers, but also the quality will go up, because we'll have less training to do when they get to us as first-year fellows or whatever that might be.
I think something that our movement has not been very intentional about is really providing training and mentorship. Coming from private practice, there was a very structured investment that was made in younger attorneys to develop, in addition to all of the work that they were doing for clients. I think with resources as thin as they are, we're all trying to stretch them as far as we can. It's really hard to justify the investment in really focused training to groom that next amazing generation of lawyers. And it's hard because animal law is still a new field. We have a lot of great people who've been doing this work for a while now, but it really is nothing in comparison to some other fields where there's this huge body of all of these people who've been doing it for such a long time to learn from. So I think being more intentional with trying to figure out opportunities, whether it's through a formal mentorship program or training programs, making that investment, agreeing as a bigger group to do that, it could go a long way.
I don't think anybody really thinks like I'm going to go to law school and be an administrative lawyer, but in reality there's a lot of ability to really affect change through the regulatory system and through using administrative tribunals. If those areas aren't sort of illuminated or made, students aren't made aware of this as in a high impact area where legal change and reform can really be made and relatively quickly and inexpensively, then we're losing a real opportunity to create a generation of lawyers working on behalf of animals and having ready access to an area of law that doesn't require maybe the highest levels of reaching the highest echelons of your legal career.
So I think there's a huge need for more lawyers doing animal law in private practice. There are very few. I think we can get more animal lawyers in institutions, in nonprofit organizations, by expanding the number of fellowships that are available. Most animal law jobs with organizations require at least 2 to 3 years of experience. And some of the organizations are having a hard time finding people to fill those positions, but there are a huge number of students who are coming out of law school wanting to do animal law, students who went to law school to do animal law, who need to get those 2 to 3 years of experience somehow, and fellowships are a really great way to do that, and that is actually how I got my start.
I think we as a movement, particularly the organizations that have animal law capacity and attorneys, need to invest the time and energy in those resources. I think there's a lot of hesitancy to do that because the sentiment is that this takes my time and my energy to mentor somebody, to give them assignments. But I feel like in many cases we disregard the positive outputs of that investment, and that might be work that's being done for your organization. I mean, if you're giving these people work that's substantive and it leads to whether it's a complaint or a filing or a lawsuit or even a letter to somebody that might make a difference, that's valuable. I also think that we overlook the value that those individuals are getting from working on those assignments. Even if they may never end up working in the field of animal law, they will forever carry with them the stories and the facts and the details of their assignments. If I give somebody an assignment, say, find me a cruelty case for this pig who was, scalded alive in the scald tank, they will remember that forever. And in conversations they have with friends and families and issues where pork and marketing comes up, they will always remember that. And so even though they may not get into the field of animal law, they are taking tangible messages and benefits that can impact others. And I just feel like we really need to be consciously investing that effort in people. The other thing I would say in that regard is just funding. I mean, obviously, I think all of the organizations would love to have fellows and more attorneys and those types of things. You can't just pull money out of the air. And so having that funding and having people who believe in the future of animal law, believe in investing in young attorneys and the difference they can make is critical. And then I think that puts the obligation back on the organization to deliver on that investment and not just say, I've hired another attorney, but invest in that attorney, develop that attorney, and deliver meaningful results for animals. Those would be the things that I would say.
Our program at Yale Law School conceives of what an animal lawyer is very broadly. So when we went about building it, we didn't really approach it with the goal of we're going to increase the number of folks working on as animal protection attorneys on these issues full time, though I'm thrilled that seems to be happening and hope that it will continue, but instead tried to conceive of it as a long-term play about how do you shape society's understanding and treatment of animals much more broadly. So we try to think about the education of animal lawyers as the education of lawyers about animals as well. So we're not thinking just about people who will be working full-time for in this limited number of roles that there are for nonprofits, but also hopefully people who will be clerks on the Supreme Court justices, partners at major law firms with the ability to devote significant pro bono resources to these issues, entrepreneurs, columnists, et cetera. And I think it's been tremendously exciting that, with the Brooks McCormick Institute's help, we now have programs like this that are educating broad swaths of students at the country's top law schools, and we're starting to see that sort of long-term play, even just 5, 6, 7 years into these programs, starting to play out. So that ideally, I think any student that would come into a law school would then leave with an education and an understanding that the issues about animals are not an accessory or a side issue or a cute issue in the way that I think they were once conceived of, or something for the eccentric, but issues that are vital to our long-term prosperity and justice in so many ways.
I think we can get more funding for law schools. When talking to some law schools where they have wonderful legal work related to animals, they might have a dozen or a few more folks who are taking those classes. But what would happen if there was even more funding, more advertising for students to know, hey, this is what you could be doing in law school, more professors, just more opportunities in law schools with more funding. So I think that's a critical part. Another part I think has to do with reaching out to law firms in terms of the pro bono work they can do for animals, because there are a lot of great experts out there on a whole host of issues that would love the opportunity to jump in to help animals. And I have had the opportunity to work with numerous pro bono law firms doing great work for animals, and they were so excited. The last firm I talked to, the lead person said, when I go home and I tell my wife what I did, for the first time I was so proud of what I was able to share. And that's what I think we can do when we bring in more law firms into the mold of caring about animals.
We definitely need more animal lawyers in government positions. And I think that's something that's often overlooked, and it's something I'm increasingly encouraging students to consider. government lawyers have a lot of power. They are able to enforce the laws without having to worry about standing issues, for example. And when you're trying to enforce the law civilly as a private citizen or a nonprofit, if you even have a cause of action, you often will spend years litigating standing. So getting more animal lawyers into the government is really important. And I think it's partly just a matter of sharing information, making sure students are aware of this potential pathway and the steps to get there.
All of these issues come down to, well, if we're talking about legislative drafting or advocacy, then that's a skill set that then one applies to animals. The same thing with respect to other kinds of jurisprudence or litigation or any kind of commercial issue as well. These are skills that one applies to the welfare, protection, and recognition of animals. And so with that in mind, it's about teaching people who have those skill sets to use them specifically in furtherance of animal protection. And secondly, it's about teaching people about the importance of using those skill sets in the furtherance of animal protection. And thirdly, it's about teaching people who are interested in animal protection that these specific skill sets need to be applied.
I think we need to create a better, more robust network of people working in the various fields of animal law, animal policy. And I believe we need better pipelines to get into that network once it's been established. There are so many well-esteemed people working in government, whether that be in government agencies and positions like in USDA, for instance, or even US senators and their staffers in the world of public policy, who have tremendous ability to influence law and policy for animals. We've got incredible litigators working in top law firms, as well as the most esteemed animal advocacy organizations. But so many of them don't know each other, and there's no one central directory for all of these people in these positions. And nobody has mapped out where all these positions of leverage, positions of influence are. And I think that if someone were to step in, if an organization were to make that one of its focuses, that could go a long way in bringing more people into whatever area of animal law and policy they feel like they'd be best suited. And that includes new graduates from law schools, even current law students, as well as people that are mid-career that maybe want to shift towards doing more work for animals. And that doesn't need to be positions that are only focused on animals all day long. It can be, again, like some of those positions I mentioned, where you're going to be spending most of your time working on other forms of regulation, other forms of legislation, other forms of litigation, but there will be key opportunities to make a difference for animals. And I think there's so many of those positions that are currently occupied by people that aren't prioritizing animals amongst the issues they care about. And if we can get more people that do care about animals into those positions, we'd be going a long way. So we need to create the networks, create the pipelines, and map them out. The more we're doing that, I think the more we can engage graduates from law schools all across the country, all across the world in this work. Even if it's not part of their day-to-day jobs, they can always take time out of their week. If it's a quarterly meeting like the one that Harvard has, there's always opportunities to plug in and help out, and also to see what the opportunities are that are out there if they want to make the jump to a more full-time animal law position. So I'd like to see more law schools creating alumni networks. I'd like to see potentially alumni networks that cross between law schools that aren't law school specific as well, and maybe also seeing them branch out into other related fields like public policy schools. I think that could also be really beneficial.
Build the Army. We need soldiers. In my class, I tell my students that come in, I have a perspective on these issues, and I have a real world experience, and I'm going to give you the behind the scenes look at this. But my goal here is training soldiers for the movement. This isn't on the one hand, on the other hand type of a class. So if you're not in for that, then there's the door. I think we need more practical experiences in the classroom for students that will give them the tools, not just to know the law as a body of work and its canon, but also how to litigate, how to run a nonprofit management, what's a budget, how to have good hiring practices, all the day-to-day things, and then of course the nuances of litigation. So, some of that is taught. but we certainly could make it a much more practical reality for students coming through. And I think when we talk about impact, we need to teach strategic litigation, impact litigation. And what I mean by that is not necessarily looking for any illegality by some entity in kind of a whack-a-mole fashion, but having an overall strategic plan, a long-term plan as a community and as entities about how to address a problem using the law as a tool for social change. And that, again, is not taught. We have a lot of young lawyers that come to our community, and, that's something on our side that I see where, we have to instill that after school. So I think we could do more of that. And as part and parcel of that, I feel like clinical settings, not necessarily litigation clinics. Of course, they're very useful, but I'm thinking more along the lines of clinics where you can ideate, clinics where students can feel free to explore ideas, in a way that allows them to have a real-world impact from that idea.
There's already a lot of quality and a large number of animal lawyers, and we could always use more. We have a great pool to draw from. The amount of lawyers in the United States, we have an insane amount of quality and a large number of lawyers. The question is sort of how to get those who are out there into our sphere. One thing that I'm interested in doing through my work is to try to find the types of legal theories and bring the types of cases that will help show the private bar that doing animal advocacy can make you money and can give you a rewarding career. So finding ways to get attorney's fees out of the litigation that you're doing, making there be less risk in bringing certain types of cases. I think that there is certainly a role that education plays, and I think it should start really, really early. One thing that I would like to do in the next few years as an animal advocate is to go to elementary school and middle school and talk up being an animal lawyer and animal advocacy, just to show that is a potential career path. My daughter's class right now, they're talking about what they want to be when they grow up, and it's like baker and fireman, and animal lawyer didn't show up on the list. And so I think if there's ways to get animal lawyer on that list, we'll start to see more of it as they grow up, and being a viable career path that only becomes larger.
To increase animal lawyers, we need to keep on educating the bench and the bar about this interdisciplinary field. And at the same time, it's important for practitioners across the United States to connect in some sort of centralized way, which is why events like the Brooks Congress are so important.